overlooking downtown Phoenix. From the Faith Talk studios in the Camelback Towers, it's the Dustin Daniels Show, where God, sex, and current events are explored from a Christian perspective. Here's your host, Dustin Daniels.
President Obama has ordered the military to be more inclusive. Sexually inclusive, that is. And besides opening all the combat roles to women, the Pentagon has also increased maternity leave as well. The Navy and the Marine Corps, on the other hand, is working hard on new names for dozens of job titles that end in man. For example, rifleman, mine man, and assault man. Advocates for the change say that the word man can easily be replaced by technician, specialist, or professional. And now, just the other day, the DoD, the Department of Defense, has announced a new policy to allow persons who openly identify as transgendered can now serve in the military. So people who want to have surgery to become the opposite sex will be required to receive a medical statement from a military medical professional that says they suffer from what's called gender dysphoria. And once that's noted in their file, then all the medical resources will be made available to accomplish any surgical alterations. Wow. The new sexual revolution that we live in, it presses on. So my guest today is retired Colonel Dr. Ron Cruz. He is the Executive Director of Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty. Dr. Cruz, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be with you this morning, Dustin.
Well, Dr. Cruz, before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and your time in the military.
It was my great honor to serve for 28 years as a chaplain in the Army, both on the active duty side and the reserve component. I began my career with the 82nd Airborne Division, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes in order to be able to serve
God bless you.
Who also jumped out of airplanes.
Wow.
And then I ended my career serving the distinguished 101st Airborne Air Assault Division, famous by the Band of Brothers story several years ago. And I tell folks it was a great ride in between. It's just a great honor to serve primarily in my day, men, but also women who wear the uniform to defend our nation. The role of a chaplain is to make sure that our men and women serving can worship God according to the dictates of their conscience wherever they may be assigned. The reason we have chaplains is because we require military people to leave home and to go to distant places where they may not be able to worship God like they did back home. There may not be a Baptist church right outside the gate there in Balad or in the Republic of Georgia. So we send chaplains where our military personnel go, and they conduct worship services, they provide Bible studies, they do counseling, they do retreats. And if that chaplain is not of the particular faith of a service member, then that chaplain will help that service member to have the resources they need or to find someone who can minister to them in some way. And that goes for Jewish personnel, Muslim personnel, you name it. And even those who don't want to worship, well, that's their prerogative. But chaplains are there to help those who want to worship to be able to do that regardless of where they are. Chaplains also are there to comfort them when they're wounded, doing those hospital visits, encouraging them, praying for them. And then part of their responsibility as chaplains is what we call to honor the fallen. And it is that chaplain's job to be a part of a notification team, and that is the most difficult work I as a chaplain ever did, to stand at a door to notify mom or a young wife of a soldier that would not be coming home as they left, and then to provide that ministry and comfort and through that process. But that's we say in the Army that our job is to bring God to soldiers and to bring soldiers to God. That's who we are. That's our passion. That's what we do.
Wow. Well, Dr. Cruz, thank you for your 28 years of service. God bless you. And now your role within the Chaplain Alliance. So what is your role, and what does the Chaplain Alliance do?
Sure. Several years ago, when the president announced his desire to repeal the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, a number of us who are retired chaplains began meeting and discussing the impact that was going to be on the ministry of chaplains in the military services today. And after I retired, I became a chaplain endorser, and that means that we're the ones who provide chaplains to the military. To be a chaplain, you have to be endorsed by a Department of Defense recognized faith group. And there are right now in the nation, there are about 200 of us who are chaplain endorsers. So you name a faith group, Southern Baptist Convention, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, Anglican, Methodist, Episcopal, Church of God, Assembly of God, all of these faith organizations, denominations, have a one person designated to be chaplain endorser, and they're the ones who certify that a clergyman from their denomination or faith group is qualified to serve as a chaplain. And so as a chaplain endorser, and I endorse for an organization called Grace Churches International, we're concerned about this new policy and how it's going to impact the ministry of chaplains going forward. So we started meeting, and we met with some attorneys with Alliance Defending Freedom and with Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, and they encouraged us to more formally organize so that we could speak with one voice instead of 30, 40, or 50 of us endorsers trying to comment and weigh in on policy, that we organized that we would have one voice. And so in our organizational meeting, the endorsers who were present asked if I would serve as the executive director of the organization that we now call Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty. So we're an organization of chaplains endorsers whose mission is to ensure that all of our chaplains and the men and women they serve can continue to worship God according to their God-given, constitutionally protected rights without fear of recrimination. And so that's what we are about now, and we do have a website, chaplainalliance.org. You can see some of the work we're doing. Some of the first things we did was begin to work with Congress to put into the National Defense Authorization Act language that would protect the rights of conscience, not only of chaplains, but all military personnel in this new arena. And so in 2013, Congress passed a right of conscience clause and stuck it into the National Defense Authorization Act. Unfortunately, when the president signed the bill that year, he pointed out that particular section. It was Section 533, just one paragraph out of a 1,000-page bill. But the President Obama pointed to that one paragraph and said this was ill-advised and unnecessary. But I beg to differ with the President and Commander-in-Chief, because that language has already been used now in a number of incidences to protect our men and women. Everything from being able to have a Bible on their desk, to have Bible studies with other members of the service, to posting a Bible verse on a whiteboard outside their barracks room. Believers today have been under assault for living out their faith in the military. And so that's who Chaplain Alliance is. We're there to have their backs, to protect them, to get legal counsel if that's necessary, and to work them through the process of how we can solve potential problems in today's military. And so we're only only 5 years old as an organization, but we've already seen significant results by standing firm and standing together of chaplain endorsers. So we have about 35 endorsing agencies that are a part of our organization. And the chaplain endorsers, we represent about 2,600 uniformed chaplains, and there are only 5,500 chaplains currently serving in our military today, and that's in all branches and all components, Army, Air Force, Navy, and active and reserve, about 5,500. So our organization represents more than half of the current chaplains serving.
Very, very good. Wow, that's amazing that your organization came out of the Bill Clinton's Don't Ask and Don't Tell policy. My guest today is retired Colonel Dr. Ron Cruz. He's the executive director of Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty. Once again, you can check out their website at chaplainalliance.org. And today we're talking about the DoD, the Department of Defense, and their new gender identity policy. Just over the past couple of months, we've talked about the department store Target and their transgender policy. We've talked about President Obama's transgender bathroom mandate. And now this discussion is very real inside the military. And we're going to get Dr. Cruz's take on what's happening with this policy when we return. You're listening to The Dustin Daniels Show. My guest today is retired Colonel Dr. Ron Cruz, the executive director of Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty, whose vision is a nation where all chaplains and those whom they serve freely exercise their God-given and constitutionally protected religious liberties without fear of reprisal. And you heard the amazing story of how this organization was founded. So, Dr. Cruz, let's specifically discuss now the Department of Defense's new transgender policy. And the policy states that people who want to have surgery to become the opposite sex will be required to receive this medical statement from a military medical professional that says they suffer from what's called a gender dysphoria. And once that's noted in their file, then all the medical resources will be made, and then they can move towards surgery. And this word gender dysphoria, that basically means a person who feels like they're the wrong gender. So can you give us some insight of what's going on here?
Dustin, I just stand amazed at what the President has laid upon our military, and through Ash Carter, his Secretary of Defense, pushing the military to change their policies of what used to be a court-martial offense is now open and promoted by our Defense Department. The Secretary of Defense pushed this policy onto the military, and I've heard from some senior military officers who fought back, who asked for more time. We need to study this issue more. There are ramifications of this we're not sure about, but the Secretary of Defense said this will be done. And since our system of government is that our military is ultimately commanded by a civilian, the Commander-in-Chief, the President, and a civilian appointee, the Secretary of Defense, they had no option. And so right after the Secretary announced this new policy of allowing transgendered persons to serve in the military, chaplain endorsers got an invitation to a conference call with the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel. And in that phone call, he told us, chaplain endorsers, some of the ramifications of this policy. And as you stated, he said that medical personnel are required to put into a military person's record that they suffer from gender dysphoria. One of the endorsers asked this Pentagon official, well, what about if that medical officer has conscience objections, that he does not agree that there is such a thing, and holds biblical views about male and female? And we were told basically that medical military person to fully transgender will be paid for by taxpayer dollars.
Wow.
Now, this is
Man
the
alive.
first time ever that military medical dollars will be used to make someone unqualified for military deployments. Now, let that sink in for a second. Medical military dollars have always been used to help military people get ready to go to war, or if they get injured through wounds suffered in combat or through accidents, military medical dollars are used to patch them up so they can get well and be ready to go to war. For the first time ever, military medical dollars are going to be used to make someone disqualified for significant lengths of time from deployment. Because once they start these therapies and the drugs that are involved, those drugs are very sensitive drugs, have to be in certain environments that you cannot take to a hostile work environment, to a war zone. So that means that the military people undergoing that treatment cannot be deployed.
Wow.
So, I mean, moms and dads need to be aware of this. And secondly, we were told that because these military personnel will be in various stages of their transgender process, this is the way the senior Pentagon official put it. And I hope you don't mind me using this language because this is the language he used. He said, there will be mixed genitalia in military bathrooms, showers, and living facilities. Now, think about this. A young 18-year-old heading off into the military, leaving a Christian home, and we have young women who are volunteering to serve, and we're hoping they're not going to be drafted, but that's another issue. But right now, if they volunteer to serve, they may be assigned to a military installation, and the typical military barracks now are two-person room barracks. So a young woman, 18-year-old, shows up at her first duty assignment, and she's assigned to a two-person barrack and discovers that she's assigned to barrack with a male who is transgendering into a female and is already under that process and therefore is eligible for female barracks. Now, if this young woman complains, she will be in the wrong because by the military policy, this transgender policy, the person being transgendered will be protected. The person who complains will be in the wrong. She will have no recourse. Now, I'm confident there will be some commanders out there, some senior non-commissioned officers who will be understanding, and they'll try to work to solve this problem. There will be others where that young woman will have no recourse whatsoever. This is the new military that is being used as a social experiment by this administration. For the first time in my life, Dustin, I can no longer recommend young men and women joining today's military because of this extreme policy. This is going to have significant impact on recruiting, on retention. I already know of officers and senior non-commissioned officers are putting in their paperwork saying, I'm out of here. I can no longer serve in this military. I am very concerned about what this means for our nation's ability to defend itself within the coming year to 2 years unless there is a significant change, unless Congress intervenes and tells this administration, no, you can no longer use the military as a social experiment.
Wow. Dr. Ron Cruz, he's a retired colonel and now the executive director of Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty. Today we're talking about the DOD's new transgender policy To learn more about Dr. Ron Cruz and his role with Chaplain Alliance, you can visit chaplainalliance.org. And we are out of time already. And as I think about what you said, Dr. Cruz, I'm not going to pretend that I know what happens in the military because I've never served. But it's been my observation that people die in combat. And we're talking about war. And like you said, this whole thing just seems like a social experiment. I love that term. And if it is it's a very serious social experiment. And man, as you speak on this topic, I can just see lots of mistakes being made, which can cause even more casualties. And how this affects civilians, how this affects us as a complete nation. So once again, if you're listening and your children are getting ready to go into the service, visit chaplainalliance.org for more information. Wow. If you are new to the program, this is what we talk about. We talk about the sexual revolution and how it affects you. And we have 150 radio shows on the website. You can go to DustinDanielsRadio.com to check that out. 1 Corinthians 4:20 says the kingdom of God isn't just a lot of talk. It's living and living in God's power. I love you, and I'll see you next week.
The Dustin Daniels Radio Show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subject matter covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the host nor the station is engaged in rendering counseling advice for your personal situation. If you need further help, we encourage you to seek the services of a Christ-based counseling professional. For more information on the radio show, visit DustinDanielsRadio.com.